Do not murder, nurture life. So Rabbi Jonathan Sachs actually said it took a long time till he actually went to Auschwitz. And when he got there, he said, when I first stood in Auschwitz, Birkenau, the question that haunted me was not, where was God? God was in the command, you shall not murder. God was in the words, you should not oppress the stranger. God was saying to humanity, your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. God did not stop the first human beings eating forbidden fruit. He did not stop Cain committing murder. He did not stop the Egyptians enslaving the Israelites. God does not save us from ourselves. That, according to the Talmud, is why creating man was such a risk, that the angels advised against it. The question that haunts me after the Holocaust, as it does today in this new age of chaos, is where is man? And so the atrocity of Auschwitz is really an atrocity of you shall not murder. That's what went wrong. Human beings decided to murder, chose to murder. Introduction, the value of life. Life is the most basic right we have. Where does this right come from? What is included in it? So I'd like to actually go to the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. And of course, what we've seen in the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks is governments really taking responsibility and making decisions, making laws to, among others, guarantee life, right? Dealing with the issue of this pandemic has been a life and death situation. So what is included in the right to life? Is life limited to the physical? How about the emotional, intellectual, spiritual? And whose responsibility is it to secure this right? Anyone want to comment?
I don't think that life is limited to the physical.
Life is not limited to the physical. Okay.
It is the emotional, the intellectual, and spiritual.
Right.
It's everything that one is able to put out there, for lack of a better word.
Good.
Everybody's entitled to that. Life is what makes one think, and be emotional, and I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little confused.
No, you're not. I think you're saying great. That is true. Life is definitely not limited to the physical. Do people take as much effort and concern about the emotional, intellectual, and spiritual as we do the physical? I don't think so, right?
I think some people do.
There's,
Depends what sort of line you're in, whether you're
right, but generally,
whether you're
I'm talking,
academic or
right, I'm talking generally about general populist people, governments. Do you see it as the responsibility of government to secure your right to life?
Well, let's just take this position that we're all in at the moment. The government or the powers that be, somebody
well, it's not your right, you don't have the ability, but is it illegal to, you know?
It's interesting that that our rights to liberty are being limited for the sake of life.
Right.
I mean, you could. What about the option of saying, listen, life goes on as normal, and those who are in fear for their own health, those who are at risk, stay home. You have a right to stay home.
Yeah, I think Sweden tried to do that basically.
Yeah, I think a lot of people died there.
It's quite interesting. Well, yes, a lot of people have died there, but you know, it's like 2,500, I think.
Right, but so Sweden has a similar population amount as Israel, and
Oh, really?
while 2,500 have died in Sweden, only about 2,500 died in Israel.
Wow. So, okay, so the question is, you know, Sweden would turn around and say, well, that's the price we pay for our civil liberty.
And economy.
And Israel saying, not worth it. Right? So what's the Jewish opinion? Let us investigate. Yeah. I'm not sure we will get to an answer for that. Okay, introduction. Pshat, literal understanding. Murder is killing is by definition killing another person unjustly. It is one of the three sins for which we should rather die rather than transgress, even under duress. There are different rules for intentional and unintentional murder. In biblical times, an intentional murder was sentenced to death, and an unintentional murderer was sentenced to a city of refuge until the death of the high priest. So the verse is the same: Lo titzach, do not murder. The Ibn Ezra writes, do not murder with your hand or with your tongue, by testifying falsely to kill him, or through slander, or by intentionally giving someone bad advice that you know will end up killing them. If you know a secret which could save someone from murder, and you don't reveal it, you're like a murderer. So once again, Ibn Ezra took this diber not in its halachic sense. You know, there's definitely lo titzach, means to murder cold-blooded. But anything we do, we should be as removed as possible from all murder. So some interesting questions about the literal meaning. Is suicide murder? What about euthanasia?
There's a big question on that, isn't there?
Yes, there is. From a halachic point of view, suicide is murder, murder of the self. Euthanasia is basically not allowed. One cannot do any proactive endeavor to bring about the death of a person, no matter how sickly or deadly they are. There is some point where halachically one does not have to administer help in order for the person to live. So, you know, your basic feeding tube and breathing tube, yes, but other things, you know, medicines that might help a person keep alive, those do not have to be administered in order to help people be alive. But in a general sense, the Talmud says there was one of the rabbis, I think Rabbi Hanina ben Tradian, was dying, and the Romans had put wet cotton wool around him, swabs of cotton wool around him, so he would die slowly because they were burning him. And the student said, Rabbi, open your mouth and let the flames in, and somehow, you know, that might kill him sooner. And he said, he who gave life shall take away life. So in terms of that, it seems that we are very pro-life. I know that's an abortion question, but that too, by the way, abortion from a halachic point of view is also forbidden, unless it's to save the mother's life. Okay, have we as a society become less sensitive to the devastation of murder? Here in America, we have these mass shootings now and again. Canada just had one. There is a lot of murder around us. How sensitive are we to it? Do we look at the news and see, read about killings, and are we desensitized, or is it just removed from us? Heaven forbid it should become closer to home. I think we would be very sensitive.
Well, that's the point. If you don't know people, you say how terrible.
Right.
And then you go on to the next one. But if you know somebody there, it becomes very personal, and it becomes a sensitivity within yourself and with everybody you know.
Right.
Yes, no?
Yeah,
I think it depends.
I think so.
Depends on how close you are to the murders.
I think so.
I mean, with a school shooting, if you know one or two of the kids is being shot, then the whole thing becomes exaggerated.
Right.
No, it can't become exaggerated because it's a terrible thing. But it becomes exaggerated for you compared to somebody else who doesn't know.
Okay. Do you consider selling dangerous substances murder? To what degree does our litigious society and identity politics protect or inhibit our ability to bring about justice, specifically the murder for murder and generally? And in addition to physical murder, we are warned against slander, false testimony, and even withholding evidence that could lead to unjust killing. How would you rate our current society on these parameters? No, I think we're pretty good. I think all the countries we live in, probably the most murder happens in per capita in South Africa, as opposed to Israel or to America. But the law is pretty clear about murder, and there's an understanding. We do not commit adultery before this. I don't think that the world's doing very well with that one. We're doing much better with thou shalt not murder from a legal point of view. From an incident point of view, I don't know how well we do. Okay, let's get into the yesod, the underlying principle over here. So, in the image of God, we may not murder because each human being has intrinsic dignity, worthy of honor and respect. This dignity comes from human beings made in God's image, capable of acting in godly ways. It gives us the ability to make conscious, free will decisions, to be just, truthful, and peaceful, to show love, compassion, and mercy, to make the world a better place. But at the end of the day, even without any of those attributes, every human that is alive is in the image of God. Being made in God's image means having the potential to live elevated lives and make a positive impact on the world. The Deber do not murder demands that we take utmost care not to endanger or diminish any human life, including our own. So the text says, whoever sheds the blood of man in man, shall his blood be shed, for in his image did God make man. So when you hear the words being made in God's image, what does that mean to you? What does it mean? How does being made in the image of God entitle one to life? And are there any other creations created in the image of God? Any comments? Greg, what does it mean that a person's in the image of God?
Well, I've never fully understood it, and it's the murder question is not necessarily whether it's speech or action. I've never understood it to be killing the image of God. It's more killing the creation of God that was made in his likeness. We don't know what in the image means because we don't know what Hashem looks like. He's meant to be a corporeal being. you can't have a physicality to a corporeal being.
Right. So obviously it doesn't mean the physical, right? God has no body.
But does it not refer to the neshama?
So many said,
Isn't all neshamas a sort of a piece of Adam Rishon, which was the first human or first hominoid
right,
created?
right. So many Meforshim seem to say it's going with the neshama. The Sforno says that's really the reason why, when you kill someone physically, you're not killing their neshama. So he says, but since the human body is the vessel which contains the neshama, therefore you should not kill a human being. Right? It's murder is because the physical human life is a container, it's a vessel for containing the neshama. Excellent, good. Okay, Marcus, your thoughts?
I just think that's a really big one. What it is to be made in the image of God. Right, and I had those thoughts too. It's like if you kill somebody physically, you are not killing them. You're killing their body, but their neshama lives on. I do think that being made in God's image is more a reference to the neshama than to the body. In that, if we purify ourselves and we develop ourselves correctly, we have more and more of God's capabilities, so to speak. Maybe that
right. That's a big question. Is it actual or potential? Right? Now, it seems to be from the verse, by the way, that there is a level of actual, right? Because it's saying, don't murder people because they were made in the image of God. So it could, it could be the potential, meaning since each human being has the potential to get to the level of being in God's image, therefore you shall not kill them. And in a sense, I think if we look at the hierarchy of our world, the worm eats from the ground, and then the bird eats the worm, and then the cat eats the bird, and then the human, right, eats the cat.
God, yeah.
That sort of fell apart, Rabbi, but carry on.
Yeah. Right.
Maybe in Wuhan, China, but not here where we all live.
Right. So I should have made it the cow. So the cow eats the grass, right? And the human eats the cow. So there's no greater purpose in creation than the human being. And because,
Rabbi, can I ask you a question?
And because, hang on a second, because everything serves the human being, and that's really this image of God in this world, one cannot dispose of them. They're not there for your use. You can't kill a person for whatever use you might have. Yes, Mark.
Okay, I was just thinking about the actual reference to creation in the Torah. And wasn't it by his word that the first acts of creation happened, specifically with the animals and the plants, for example? But for man, we were created with a direct involvement of Hashem. What was it saying? Vayipach Elokim. So the soul was something extra. So we have to look at the real difference between ourselves and the lower level animals.
Right.
And within that, you can start to unwrap the actual answer itself.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, Marcus, these, in this introduction, I made a few comments, which are all come from sources. The ability to make conscious free will decisions. That the Sforno says, and the Nefesh HaChaim say that's unique to human beings. To be just, truthful, and peaceful, to show love, compassion, and mercy, even when it's not on one's own. And to be devoted to a sake which is bigger than one's own, to make the world a better place. These are aspects of the image of God, which the different commentators say are within the human capability. Sorry, Marcus.
No, I was just thinking, unlike animals, we walk on two legs. and we have two arms, two hands. And it's when we talk about God with, like, you know, anthropomorphism physically, we talk about him taking Israel out of Egypt with an outstretched arm, as opposed to an outstretched hoof. So maybe physically also there's something there.
For sure. The Maharal of Prague says the reason why humans stand upright as opposed to all other animals that don't, you know, and even the apes use their hands for walking. The most upright being is the human being. I guess you could go back to Homo erectus. And the reason for that is because just like God has dominion over the world, so too human beings have dominion over the world. So that concept, that godly concept of dominion, translated into the physical body, created us standing erect, right? And he says, therefore, you see that, he explains that the image of God, yes, does take a physical representation. That's why, there's a prohibition if you hang someone. Let's say someone got the death sentence, they have to be hung afterwards. One may not hang them overnight. And the verse says, because the image of God is there. And that seems to point to the fact that the physical body is the image of God. And therefore it would be disgraceful to let it, as it were, decay on a tree in front of everyone, hanging. So yes, the person met their punishment, all the other people learned their lesson, they see what happens. But then to see that, the desecration of that human body would be a desecration of Hashem, of the godly image. Okay. Let me ask you a question. So if this is the principle behind do not murder, that people are made in the image of God. So whereas do not murder is a very specific mitzvah, let's think about this as a diber. How could what would you say as a general principle, to enlarge from do not murder, what would you say is the underlying principle over here in terms of what we should be doing or should not be doing? Ilana, you're being very quiet tonight.
Just tired. Well, I suppose it's to do with respect and human dignity. When you say dignity,
Okay, good.
My head's not all together tonight.
It's okay.
Well, it's something I heard a share a long time ago, and it's something I've looked up and tried to understand. The 10 Commandments aren't necessarily commandments.
Correct.
Okay, the first four are man and God. The fifth being respect thy mother and father is man and God. But if you look at the 6 to 10, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not murder. Before one can have a right to be murdered, one has to have an obligation to respect the life that you're taking away. So is it more about the obligation to respect other people, respect the belongings, do not steal, do not covet, respect?
Yeah.
That's what it's about. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, listen, there is definitely a mitzvah. There's a commandment, something we should be careful not to do. But exactly, these are the Serata Dibrot. These are the 10 general principles, and each one is the epitome of an underlying principle or core value. So when I think about the core value here, I would think, well, not only should we not murder, but we should be so concerned about human life, right? We should, in fact, nurture life. We should be, right? This is telling us to be life nurturers. When the Jewish people, I'm going to read over here, when the Jewish people heard the commandments at Sinai, they immediately transformed every negative into a positive. For example, the positive opposite of murder is nurturing of life. And this starts with health and security. And I'm just going to read the Rambam over here. The Rambam says, ravenous eating is as deadly to the body as poison. Right? So we've got to be really careful about how we, to me, do not murder. Nurturing life means other people's and your own. So we are responsible for our own health. And that's what the Rambam says, right? Who guards his mouth and his tongue, guards his soul against distress. We should be very careful with health, right? We should eat healthily. We should exercise a lot and be in, good physical condition. I think bicycle riding is a fantastic thing to do. In fact, Mark, every time you're on the bike, you should think to yourself as actually fulfilling a core value of Judaism. What about security? So the Rambam says over here that this requirement applies to a roof. He's talking about putting up a boundary on the roof, and similarly to any place that might present a danger and cause a person to stumble and die. For example, if a person has a swimming pool, put up a gate, put up a fence, right? And for it's a positive mitzvah to remove any obstacle that could pose a danger to life, right? And this is what it says: be aware of yourself, guard your soul. This is something that we are specifically commanded to. So, let's just look at one or two questions over here. Since we are commanded to take care of our of ourselves, who's responsible is our health. What role does the government and law in this, right? Is the government, well, we know right now they're being very concerned about our health. And there are Food and Drug Administrations or the equivalent in every country. Do you think they are careful enough about how healthy the food is that is allowed to be sold? And what is the balance of allowing commerce when you know there will be some, when you know there will be some adverse health issues that come from that? The rates of starvation in this world are quite high. The rates of obesity are even higher, right? There's a lot of ill health in this world just by the fact that people don't eat healthily. Security, right? Are we careful enough? Texting and driving, using your phone in the car, to me is a violation of do not murder. It's not nurturing life. It's taking an unnecessary risk for life. So this is an interesting.
That's got nothing to do with murder, if I could say.
No, it's nothing to do with murder as a specific deed, but as a core value for life. What do not murder typifies is nurturing life, being concerned for health and safety. It definitely is a violation of that, right? If someone is concerned for health and safety, they would not text and drive. It's a very stupid thing to do, a very dangerous thing to do. What are some acceptable reasons to endanger your own life? For example, can one endanger one's own life to save another person? This has to be a question that every medical worker, people, nurses, doctors going into hospitals right now are the most, are the most exposed to coronavirus in their own lives. The many medical workers in many countries have died. Is that responsible?
Yeah.
Why?
That just goes in line with your work. Think about it like a police officer or a soldier. You're putting yourself in harm's way, but you're doing necessary activities. If you hold the right to life to be something self-evident or something divinely ordained, then Kal V'chomer, or Homer V'Kal, which one it is, I don't know. But it should be that choosing professions to support that life will be would be allowed, would be promoted.
You say because the greater whole is more important than the individual?
I'm not ready to say that because I think some situations require focus on the individual, and some situations require the individual to diminish his own value or diminish his own self-prioritization for the sake of the whole. It's not concrete.
Okay, interesting. Good. All right. I want to, if anyone has any more comments, let's share them now. Otherwise, let's stop for today. We can continue on Thursday, where we're going to get into what does this say about the other aspects of life, right? We've spoken about the physical, to be healthy, to be safe. How does this guide our core values when it comes to emotional, intellectual, spiritual life? Let's see what we can say about that. So